On today's show, some thoughts on an article on Cale Makar from Elite Prospects, why your NHL team should avoid trade deadline rentals at all costs this year, and why I'll always favor size over skill at the NHL Draft. All coming up on Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, I break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. If you like prospects, just put this on. I'll do the work for you. I'm Hadi Kalakeche. I'm a scout and prospect analyst across multiple platforms, including this one, and I've got a good one for you today. First off, Mitch Brown from Elite Prospects put out a fantastic article that broke down Cale Makar's progression from junior to pro and what's made him the generational defender that he is today. And I have tons of thoughts on that to share with you. Then later on, I'll talk about why the NHL's playoff contenders should avoid trade deadline rental players at all costs. And finally, in our final segment, I'll end this episode with my thoughts on the size over skill mindset in the NHL scouting sphere and why I would flip the script if I were in charge of an NHL team. Now, first off, let's get right into it here with Mitch Brown's article from Elite Prospects. It's a fantastic article. I'll be linking it down below. I'm warning you, you do need a subscription. But honestly, if you're watching this podcast and you like prospects and you're not subscribed to Elite Prospects Premium, you're making a mistake. It's a great source from everything from search engines to search up players from different leagues in different draft years, etc., to their excellent articles that come out once in a while regarding either draft prospects or drafted prospects, and even some high-end players and how they developed, articles like these. Now, that's enough PR for Elite Prospects on our end here. I'll just get right into it with my sort of breakdown of so more or less the gist of it. I'll leave enough info so that you're interested in reading that article because I really think it's worth a read. But just to give you a quote to start the article off, Mitch Brown, who's a great scout, by the way, he broke down sort of what changed in Makar's game through this article. Just to start it off, I just want to give you this quote. So he says, "The player who defines today's generation of defensemen," referring to Cale Makar, "was far from a unanimous fourth overall pick in the 2017 draft. He defaulted to low percentage plays, threw away possession under pressure with options, and generally played below his skill level, not to mention uncertainty around playing in the AJHL, Canada's second or third best junior A league. That's not the Makar of today, who is unwavering in his commitment to make the most out of every puck touch." So then Mitch Brown goes on to break down what's changed and what's improved in Makar's game. Everything from his ability to walk the blue line, his blue line activation, all these elements that he says weren't key parts of his game back in Junior A and have become defining skills for him. So, if you look at it in a vacuum, you see a Cale Makar back in that day who, as Brown said, would regularly turn over possession and play below his skill level, so he wouldn't exploit his tools as much as he should. That's the main takeaway out of this, is that Makar had a lot of tools, a lot of stuff to work with in terms of his actual skills, his speed, his acceleration, his agility, his ability to manipulate the puck, his hard shot. All these things were really, really good from his draft year, but it was just putting it all together in ways that translate at the NHL level, ways that advance the puck and like you said, make the best, make the most out of every puck touch. That was the hard part for Makar. And through this article, Brown breaks down how his learning opportunities in the AJHL with the Brooks Bandits helped him sort of develop these individual skills into something more potent, in terms of a combined package. Then he talks about his experience at UMass in the NCAA and how that shaped him further. So first, he mentions that for the Brooks Bandits in the AJHL, they didn't really have as fluid a system as the Colorado Avalanche, for example, have today. But in that day when Cale Makar was playing for them, they did have a lot of set plays off faceoffs, especially on the power play, and that helped Makar sort of define his role at the point and try off new things. He wasn't tasked with constantly blasting pucks from the point. There were different set plays, and you had to think the game in advanced ways, which helped him a lot in terms of translating to the next level, because you will see a lot of set plays on power plays in the NHL. Moving on from that, he also mentions the fact that at UMass, their system favored a lot of mobility from the blue line. It demanded their defensemen to activate on each side, and provide outlets and options for their wingers. There was a lot of switches going on, so Cale Makar was spending a lot of time cutting down from the blue line, and instead of using his fake shots and his pump fakes and all that stuff to create a shooting lane, he started using those to create passing lanes. And that was a strong improvement in his game, and one that continues to this day. It's a tendency that he's created for himself. In a sentence, I'd say that what's changed in Makar's game is he's found a fitting formula that works at any level. I won't go into too much detail because, again, I want you to read Mitch Brown's article. It's an excellent article on Cale Makar. But I was really astounded with what I read from him, and you can definitely see in the videos that he provides in the article as well, the examples that he gives. And Cale Makar's a great example of how player development works. So this is a great quote that sort of ends the article. I just want to provide that to you because I think it's really the main and the biggest takeaway, and what I have a lot of thoughts on my end, and that's one of the final sentences of the article, which says, development isn't just one factor. Rather, development occurs at the confluence of tools, adaptability, and a favorable environment. Again, that's tools, adaptability, and a favorable environment. Those three things are what's required for proper development to happen. Now, if your prospect already has the tools, it is much easier to create a formula that works for him, that will translate well to the NHL. That was Cale Makar's case. He had a lot of tools, but it was very raw in terms of his profile. There were a lot of things to fine tune in order to bring out the best of him, and that's what made Makar a generational defender. Is that he took all those tools and managed to put them together, to put the pieces of the puzzle together in order to be a difference maker at the next level. Now, in terms of adaptability, I talk about this all the time. Adaptability to me is such an underrated aspect of a player's profile, and it's something that's really hard to pin down. You have to do a lot of research to see how adaptable a player is. But in Cale Makar's case, it was really evident that, when he got to Brooks, in the AJHL, he was extremely frail. He was extremely physically shy, and in his last year in Brooks, he became a physical monster essentially, who could throw a reverse hit on you when you least expect to, put you on the ice with a lot of ease. He just became a much more physically involved player, and that was required in order to adapt at that level, because the AJHL does involve a lot of physicality. And when you're that frail at that young an age, you have to sort of adapt quickly and learn to fend off defenders and forecheckers. And he did that brilliantly by developing his physical game, understanding the ins and outs of body positioning and posture in order to take a hit properly and actually come out with the puck. There are already those indications, and especially when he got to the NCAA with UMass, it was even more obvious, because the jump from the AJHL to the NCAA is absolutely massive, and that was a big fear, seeing how he was going to translate his game to a much higher level in the NCAA, and he translated it wonderfully. I mean, he was one of the top performers in the draft, in his draft class. By the time he got to the NCAA, he won some awards in the NCAA as well for his offensive prowess as a defender. And as Mitch Brown mentions in the article, he added tools to his game. Rather, he used his tools in different ways in order to create better results, and that carries to his game today. So he adapted to every level he played. So once I saw him in the NCAA with UMass, I was sold on him. For me, this was a surefire, top pairing puck moving defenseman. I didn't think he'd be generational. I didn't think he'd be this good this quick. But man, I was sold on him the moment I saw him in the NCAA for the first time. The ability to understand routes, to find secondary passing lanes, to exploit the best options that were available to him on the ice, and open up some lanes when nothing's available. I mean, this was a complete offensive defenseman. So, lastly, and I think more importantly, is the favorable environment part. For me, what a favorable environment means is an environment that's going to favor growth, and not restrain a player in the teachings that the coaching wants to teach, and rather create flexibility for a player to learn. I think that Brooks was a decent development team for him, but UMass really pulled out the best out of him and made him who he is today. Now, obviously, the system favored him, and that was sort of a circumstantial thing, but they were definitely teaching Cale Makar to explore his offensive side and venture down from the blue line and sort of shorten the ice in the offensive zone, and that made him play with against more pressure when he did get the puck on defense in the offensive zone. So it's sort of when you play so fluidly and aggressively in the offensive zone, your defensemen are going to benefit the most from that because they're going to be learning the most out of those circumstances. Now we're going to move on to our second segment where I discuss the NHL's playoff contenders and why they shouldn't be going for rentals just after these messages. So I want to talk to you about Athletic Greens and the product AG1. Athletic Greens is already a widely trusted company with over 7,000 five-star reviews and recommendations from pro athletes. Their multivitamin AG1, which is easy to use with just a quick scoop and some water, uses the best natural products, no GMOs, no artificial anything, and it helps with everything from sleep quality to gut health to boosting your immune system and much more. With one scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to start off the day right. It's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with the best weapon you can buy. No more taking 20 pills and supplements in the morning, just one quick scoop and a cup of water, and you're set for the day. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs for your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL network to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, so moving on to our next segment, I wanted to break down for you why I think your favorite contender should not be going for any trade deadline rentals, at least not high profile ones, for this year's trade deadline, especially if a first round pick in the 2023 draft is involved. The answer is pretty simple. This is a very deep draft. I'd say up until pick 50, you're still getting some high end talent with some decent upside that won't be worth 30-ish games if you're lucky of a player before they hit the free agent market in July. For me, it's just not worth the trade-off. Now, to give you an example, let's say your team goes for a, I don't know, Joel Edmondson at the deadline and trades a 2023 first round pick for him. Well, first, you're not getting a lot of Joel Edmondson in those 30 games. You're going to be getting a player who's played the entire season in a top four for a team that's getting shelled in their own zone. So he's going to be pretty exhausted by the time playoffs come around. That's the case for most defenders, actually most forwards that you're going to be trading for off of a bottom of the lineup team. It's just a reality. Those players usually come off exhausted. And then let's say your team gets unlucky and gets kicked out of the playoffs in the first round. Well, you might be giving up a 2021st overall pick in the 2023 NHL draft. The players that might be available by then, just to count a few that, in my opinion, should be available in that range. Jaden Perron, who might turn into a top 6 scorer. Axel Sandin Palika, who might be one of the top offensive defensemen to come out of this draft. Gavin Brindley, another undersized, high pace, very intense, winger who can both score goals and provide assists. Quentin Musty, who's one of the most skillful, most toolsy players in this draft. He does need some work in terms of processing and all that, but he will definitely be available in this range, unless a team takes an early shot on him, which I'd be very surprised. Players with this profile usually slip down a bit. Cohen Zemer is almost definitely going to be available. He is a goal scoring winger, one of the best goal scorers you can find outside of the top 10. And, if you get him in that range for 30 games of a Joel Edmondson, for example, you're set. And even maybe Caden Price could be available. I have Price 11th overall in my rankings, but I've seen them a lot in the 25 to 30 range on a lot of rankings. And if you can get who I think is the best defender in this draft for 30 games of a middle pairing defenseman, a middle pairing aging defenseman, for example, and a lot of teams have those, and a lot might be available for this upcoming trade deadline in exchange for a high draft pick. I think that's a fantastic trade-off. So if you're the contender looking at this and being like, who can I pick up at this trade deadline to help boost my chances of making a long run in the playoffs, I would say go for the bottom of the lineup players. And if you've got a high profile if you got a high profile winger or center that's going to be available at this trade deadline, player with a year of contract left who can give you 60 plus points in a season, and you want him for the playoffs in order to get some secondary scoring, or even some primary scoring if he's good enough, I still don't think it's worth the trade, especially if you're trading a first rounder, because you can get kicked off in the first round or the second round and still give a top 25 pick to a team that's going to go ahead and pick up an excellent player in this draft and come away looking absolutely wonderful on their end and making you look ridiculous. So I think the smartest and safest bet for a team that's looking to make a deep playoff push is to go ahead and go for bottom of the lineup players. Let's say, best case scenario, you end up trading a first round pick for a player who gives you a fantastic playoff run. You end up winning the cup. You get this, you end up giving the 32nd overall pick. Well, here's a couple names that I think will almost definitely be available at 32nd overall. First and foremost, you've got Hunter Bristovitz, who is probably the best breakout player in this draft on defense. He's a right-handed defenseman. He'll almost definitely give you solid breakouts and strong transition numbers, especially offensively. On top of being a decent defender, he could very well be available at 32. Another right-handed defender in Jordan Tourigny, who for me is among the top offensive defensemen in this draft, and is right-handed, which is a coveted item. Of course, he's 5'9", 150 pounds, a bit slight and not very physical. But man, he's got a lot of offensive tools and the brain to go with it. Speaking of brain, you've got Luca Pinelli, who's one of the smartest players in the draft this year. Who, I've got him in the 25 range, but I'm almost definitely sure he's not going in the first round. His brother certainly didn't, Francesco Pinelli. He was in a weaker draft, and I think Francesco's got more skill than Pinelli on top of having that elite brain. So the odds of Pinelli slipping out of the first round going into the second, for me, are massive. And if you can get him at 32nd overall, that's an excellent pickup for me. Moving on, you've got Ryan Leonard, who's a pure goal scoring center. You can get that at 32nd overall. Gabe Perreault, who's very shifty, very dynamic, has got a lot of playmaking ability. He should be available in that range. Tanner Molendijk, who's probably the best transition defender. He defends rushes extremely well and does it mainly better than any other defender in this draft. Could very, very well be available in this at 32nd overall. And finally, another player that I think is worth a mention for being available at 32nd overall is Emil Järventie, who's got a ton of skill, a ton of speed, can make plays at high pace. I don't like his processing. I don't like his defending and his physicality. But if you can turn those high-end tools into something potent, you might end up with a top 6 forward for a first-round draft pick that you got from a team for a player who you weren't going to sign and who ends up playing, 30 games or less for them, and you just come out of that looking exceptional. So for me, this is absolutely not the year to be going for high-end rentals that'll cost you a first-round pick. If you're trading a first-round pick, make sure it's the 2025 draft, because 2024 is going to be solid as well. So for me, it's just a no-brainer in these sorts of cases. If you've got the foundations for a contending team and you want to make a push and guarantee that you have the best chance of winning the cup, go for bottom of the line of players who will cost you third or fourth line picks. Consult with your analytics team. Try to find guys who are very much underrated analytically, and that are available for that low price, but who can give you a solid impact in the bottom 6 or even sort of chip in on the second line. A player like Arturi Lehkonen, who cost the Avalanche Justin Barron in a second round pick, would be a fantastic pickup for a team that's contending and looking for someone who can contribute defensively, can contribute on special teams, give them solid minutes with top players, complement top players really well. Those kinds of pickups are what you go for in that range. And the Avalanche even ended up re-signing Lehkonen because they loved what they saw of him. So those kinds of situations are what you need to gauge as a contending team and see sort of where the high value is in terms of lower price pickups. If you're going to be trading a first round pick in 2023, make sure it's an excellent player that you are definitely going to resign coming the other way, because otherwise you will look absolutely foolish. Now, we're going to head into our final segment of the day, where I discuss the size versus skill conundrum in NHL drafting. We'll get to it right after these messages. All right, so for our final segment of the day, I wanted to highlight the size versus skill conundrum in NHL scouting. For me, NHL teams tend to favor size as an asset a lot more than they should. And the 2023 draft is full of smart and skilled, shorter, forwards, especially. There are some defensemen as well, like Jordan Tourigny, Hunter Bristovitz, who are below 6 foot and are extremely sort of solid in different areas and could provide extremely good value for an NHL team. But especially on forward, I mean, the amount of players in this draft who are under 5'10" that could offer extremely good values for their respective NHL teams. You just go down the list. First, in the top two is under 5'10". You've got Connor Bedard and Matvei Michkov, 5'10", 185, 5'10", 160, respectively. Then you go down the list: Zach Benson, 5'10", 160 pounds. Andrew Crystal, 5'10", 165. Lower down, especially if you're, like I mentioned, if you're getting a later round pick, the amount of very skilled players you can get that are pretty undersized is ridiculous. From 26 to 30, from 26 to 29, the four picks I've got are Luca Pinelli, 5'9", 161, Jaden Perron, 5'8", 157, Denver Barkey, 5'8", 174, and Will Whitelaw, 5'9", 172. So those are four extremely skilled players that are below 5'10", who are going to give you a lot of value, and could end up being top six providers. Now, the reason why I believe in shorter players, more than the big strong ones, is adaptive skill. And to explain this very shortly, small forwards have to adapt in order to thrive. Big forwards can kind of cruise about and cruise through on size and strength alone. But the difference is the adaptive skills that shorter forwards are going to pick up, uh, is going to benefit them at the NHL level, whereas the bigger forwards who tend to benefit from their size and their strength at junior levels, when they reach the NHL level, that advantage disappears. Most, if not all, the defenders you're going to face are going to be looking you straight in the eyeballs, are about the same size as you, can sometimes be much stronger than you when you, for so long, you've been the strongest guy in every league you've played in. Um, the difference is stark, and the amount of adaptability that's required for a bigger player to compensate for the fact that they don't have their biggest asset anymore, for me, it's too big of an adaptation, for their their type of profile to succeed at the next level. Whereas a smaller player who has been playing against smaller players, against bigger players the whole life, they're going to head into the next level sort of used to it. They're going to be facing bigger defenders and stronger defenders and already know what to do. To give you an example, there is a 5'7", 180-pound, 21-year-old winger and center who the Habs picked up in the 6th round of the 2021 NHL draft, and that's Xavier Simoneau. Xavier Simoneau is one of the smallest players that you can find in any pipeline. At 5'7", there aren't many prospects who are smaller than him. But his entire life, he's been smaller than everyone. He's not the type of player who was average sized his whole life and then stopped growing at a certain age when everyone kept growing, because those are a bit of a red flag because they never had to adapt to being smaller. But Xavier Simoneau has always been smaller than everyone. And what's come out of that is a prospect who can fight off 6'9" defenders very easily. We talked about it yesterday with Sebastian High. There was a play in the AHL this year, his rookie year in the pros, where he pinned a 6'9" defender along the boards, took his hands away from the play, spun off, got the puck, made a pass to the slot for his teammate, who taps it in for a one-timer for a primary assist for this prospect. you don't learn that when you're 5'7" unless you've had the habit of playing against bigger and stronger guys your whole life. There are some prospects who are smaller who rely on skill exclusively, and it still works for them because they learn to play away from the puck in a way that they avoid physical altercations, that they avoid putting themselves in situations where they have to defend, along the boards and stuff like that, and put themselves in situations where they're vulnerable. For me, and Xavier Simoneau is the opposite. For him, he's never been necessarily the most fantastic goal scorer. He's got a very good playmaking touch, but it's not anything that jumps off at you. But what makes him so good is first his intensity, and second his ability to manage board battles extremely well. He's learned to take opponents' hands off of the play so that he can manage the puck before they can even get off the boards to make a play. He's learned to pin players in specific ways that make the puck go loose. He's learned to use his core strength, use his body positioning, and get low on players, hit them, while driving upwards in order to create a motion that doesn't necessarily take him out of the play and doesn't take him off of balance, but instead puts the opponent off balance regardless of their size. Again, Curtis Douglas, the player that Xavier Simoneau pinned along the boards in Laval in the AHL to win that puck battle and get a primary assist, he's a 6'9" defender. He's not a frail guy at all. And Xavier Simoneau, 5'7", he's relinquishing a foot and 2 inches of height to this player, and probably 50 pounds of weight, and he still manages to take the puck off him along the boards and make a play. I mean, this is a perfect example of adaptive skill. He's adapted the proper, physical mechanics. He's adapted the proper board habits in order to come away from puck battles with the puck more often than not, despite his size. So adaptive skill is the ability to compensate for your weaknesses with the skills that you have, and with developing new skills that circumvent the issues that you have, the limitations that you have. And that's a perfectly good example. Another case for favoring smaller skilled players over bigger, stronger players is that 6'5" forwards who have top six skill in terms of forwards are extremely rare. Right now, I count 2 of them: Tage Thompson and Elmer Soderblom. Those are the only 2 forwards that are over 6'5" that I see having high end top 6 skill. Other than that, most of the 6'5" plus players end up being bruisers. On forward, on defense, it's a bit of the same thing. You have a couple of examples of otherwise. For example, Colton Parayko, who's very big and very skilled. But they're extremely few and far between in terms of top pairing or top 4 defensemen who are that big and actually contribute in terms of skill, not just physicality and defensive prowess. Another thing for me is forwards who are 5'9" or lower or smaller, and 5'11" defenders or smaller who have elite skill are getting more frequent as well. So it's not just that 6'5" plus forwards who have skill are rare, is that 5'9" and lower forwards are more likely to be skilled. There are a lot more of them that are coming out, especially in recent drafts. You've got Cole Caulfield, Alex DeBrincat, Quinn Hughes, who are currently in the NHL, Marco Rossi, Nick Robertson, who are making their rookie starts this year. And in the pipeline, you've got guys like Logan Stankoven, Lane Hudson, Owen Zellweger. I mean, there's a long list that's growing with each year of prospects who are smaller and who have high-end skill, who are able to make plays at high levels and keep up with the NHL pace. And especially the fact that the NHL is getting less physical, the NHL is heading towards a high-speed, high-skill direction, which is going to be very exciting and draw a lot of new fans. To me, it's a bit of a no-brainer. I would personally flip the script if you're working for an NHL team and you're listening to this, which is highly unlikely, but I welcome you if you do. I would strongly recommend to start to shift your perspective on forwards, especially in a direction that favors skill and speed over size and strength. And that sums it up for today's episode. If you liked what you saw, make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and make us your first listen of the day on any other platform. We will be back tomorrow in order to discuss some more prospects news. For today, this has been Locked On NHL Prospects and Hadi Kalakeche, and I will see you next time.